Lieutenant Commander David Reed stood in the small shuttle as it approached the massive luminary vessel. The ship glowed with an eerie blue light that pulsed along its smooth hull. David checked his uniform one last time, straightening the pins on his collar. Captain Lewis' words echoed in his mind. The Luminary are formal people, Reed. One wrong move could ruin this entire first contact mission. David nodded to himself. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment. Earth needed this alliance. The Luminary controlled valuable resources and technology that humanity desperately needed after the Mars colony disaster. The shuttle docked with a gentle bump. David gathered his diplomatic package, a case containing Earth's formal greeting, information about human culture, and small gifts. His heart raced as the airlock began to cycle. "You'll be fine," whispered Lieutenant Park, the pilot. "Just remember your training." The door slid open, revealing a chamber that seemed to be made of living light. The walls pulsed with soft blue energy that flowed like water. 5 luminaries stood in perfect formation, their iridescent skin catching the light in hypnotic patterns. David stepped forward, careful to maintain the exact posture he'd been taught. The central figure moved toward him. Commander Nera was taller than he expected, nearly 7 feet, with graceful limbs and skin that shimmered with subtle patterns. Her 3 eyes, 1 central and 2 on either side, studied him with undisguised curiosity. "Lieutenant Commander Reed," she said, her voice musical despite the mechanical translation. "I am Commander Nera of the Luminary Diplomatic Fleet. Welcome aboard the Starlight." David bowed at precisely the angle he'd been taught. "Commander Nera, I bring greetings from Earth and the United Planetary Alliance." She extended her hand, palm down, exactly as his briefing had indicated she would. David took her slender hand in his. Her skin was warm and seemed to pulse against his palm. Following protocol, he bent slightly and touched his lips briefly to the back of her hand. The formal Earth greeting for high dignitaries. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The assembled luminary gasped as one. Nera's skin erupted in bright flashes of color, pinks, golds, and deep blues cascading across her form. Her 3 eyes widened to perfect circles, and she made a sound that his translator couldn't process. When she spoke again, her voice was higher, almost breathless. "You kissed me," she exclaimed, the translator struggling to keep up with her rapid speech. "That means we're bonded for life." David froze, his mind racing to understand what had just happened. The other luminary were now talking rapidly, their skin flashing with what seemed like excitement or alarm. Some were pointing at him. What?" David stammered, dropping protocol entirely. That was just a formal greeting. Nera's central eye blinked rapidly. "The mouth-to-skin contact is the final stage of our sacred bonding ceremony. It is performed only when 2 souls have agreed to join forever." Her colors shifted to deep purples. "We are now life partners." The luminary officers were all staring at him. Some appeared shocked, others seemed amused, and a few looked openly hostile. "There must be a mistake," David said carefully. "On Earth, this gesture is simply a sign of respect. I had no intention." "Intentions are irrelevant," interrupted an older luminary with pale blue skin. "The bond has been sealed in front of witnesses. It is done." David felt sweat beading on his forehead. 6 months of preparation, and no one had mentioned this crucial cultural detail. He tried to remember his training for unexpected situations. Step 1. Remain calm. Step 2. Seek clarification. "Commander Nera," he said, keeping his voice steady, "I apologize for this misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss this privately." Nera's colors settled into a more controlled pattern. "Of course, bondmate. Please follow me." The term made David wince, but he followed her through corridors of living light. Luminary crew members stopped and stared as they passed. Some placed their hands over their hearts in what appeared to be a gesture of respect or congratulation. They entered what seemed to be Nera's private quarters. The room was sparsely furnished with objects that curved and flowed like the ship itself. "Please sit," she said, indicating a chair-like structure. David sat cautiously, finding it surprisingly comfortable. "Commander, I need to understand exactly what has happened," he said. Nerad's skin rippled with colors that his translator identified as representing complex emotions. "You have initiated and completed the Nelfar, the eternal bonding. Among my people, this creates a lifelong partnership that cannot be broken." David tried to process this information. On Earth, a kiss on the hand is just a polite greeting for important people. It doesn't mean marriage or bonding. "This explains your confusion," Nera said, her central eye focusing intently on him. However, the ceremony was witnessed by official representatives. "In the eyes of luminary law, we are now joined." David thought quickly. "But surely when there's a cultural misunderstanding." "The law makes no exceptions," she interrupted. "Breaking a bond is. It simply isn't done. The consequences would be severe, especially for me." Something in her voice made David pause. "What kind of consequences?" Nera's colors darkened. "I would lose my command, my family standing, everything I've worked for over 20 cycles." She straightened. "But that is not your concern." David felt a wave of guilt. His mistake could ruin this person's life. "It is my concern if I caused it. There must be some solution." Outside the viewport, David could see Earth's ship in the distance. His mission was to forge an alliance, not create an interspecies incident. Perhaps there was a diplomatic way forward. "Commander Nera, I propose we continue our scheduled negotiations while we both consider this situation. Perhaps there's a solution that respects both our cultures." Nera's colors shifted to something warmer. "A practical approach. Perhaps humans are more adaptable than our reports suggested." She moved toward the door. "We should return to the delegation." "And David Reed." She used his name for the first time. "You may wish to avoid touching any other luminary with your mouth." Despite everything, David found himself smiling. "That's excellent advice." David sat in Commander Nera's quarters, trying to stay calm. The room had strange curved furniture that seemed to grow from the floor. Soft lights pulsed along the walls in rhythm with Nera's changing skin colors. "I don't understand," David said, leaning forward. "On Earth, kissing a hand is just a formal greeting. It's how we show respect to important people." Nera's skin flickered with bands of blue and green, colors that his translator identified as confusion and concern. "Among the luminary, the touching of mouth to skin is the final stage of our sacred bonding ceremony. It is reserved only for life mates. It is the most intimate act possible." David ran a hand through his hair in frustration. He'd studied luminary customs for months. How had everyone missed something this important? "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "I can explain to your superiors." "You cannot," she interrupted, her skin flashing with deep red streaks. "The Council has already acknowledged our bond." The ceremony was witnessed by High Officer Tolan, who has already sent formal recognition to my family house. Her third eye blinked rapidly in what David was beginning to recognize as a sign of stress. To break it would mean my dishonor and exile. David watched as her tall, normally confident posture seemed to shrink. Her shoulders tensed, and her commanding presence faltered for just a moment. "I have worked for 20 cycles to reach my position," she continued more quietly. "This complication must be managed." 20 cycles, that's like 20 years, David asked. Nera nodded. "I was the first female from my house to join the diplomatic fleet. Many opposed my appointment to commander." Her color shifted to a deep purple. "Some still do." David suddenly understood more clearly. This wasn't just about a cultural misunderstanding. It was about politics and Nera's position in her society. "Your rivals will use this against you." "They already are," Nera said. She touched a panel on the wall, and a holographic display appeared showing luminary script scrolling rapidly. "These are communications within the fleet. Many are questioning how a commander could bond with an alien without proper preparation and ceremony." David stood and paced the room. This was far more complicated than he'd realized. What exactly does this bond mean in your culture? Nera's skin rippled with gentle waves of gold, a color he hadn't seen from her before. It means we are joined spiritually and legally. We would typically share quarters, resources, and, David prompted when she paused. And thoughts, she finished. Luminary bondmates develop a telepathic connection that deepens over time. David stopped pacing. Telepathic. You can read minds. Only between bondmates and only after the connection develops, she explained. This is partly why I have seemed confused by your reactions. I expected to sense your thoughts, but there is only silence. That explained the strange way she had been looking at him, as if expecting something that never came. Humans don't have telepathic abilities, David said. At least not that we know of. This is becoming clearer to me, Nera said. Your species truly is different from ours. A chime sounded, and Nera touched the wall panel again. The trade delegation is waiting for us in the conference chamber. David sighed. I'll help figure this out, he said finally. But first, we still have negotiations to complete. Nera nodded, her colors shifting to a more professional blue. Yes, the trade agreements must proceed. As they walked through the corridors of the ship, David noticed how other luminary reacted to them. Some placed their hands over their hearts, the gesture he'd seen earlier. Others whispered as they passed. What are they saying? David asked quietly. Many are surprised by our bond, Nera replied. Some are congratulating me. Others are less supportive. They entered a large chamber where representatives from both species waited around a circular table. Captain Lewis was there, looking concerned. Commander Reed, Lewis said, pulling him aside. What's this I hear about you being married to Commander Nera? It's a misunderstanding, David whispered. The hand-kissing greeting. Apparently, it's their bonding ceremony. Lewis looked alarmed. This could complicate everything. I know. I'm working on it. The meeting began with formal introductions. David noticed that the luminary representatives treated him with a strange new deference. When resources were discussed, they addressed questions about Earth's needs directly to him, rather than Captain Lewis. During a brief recess, an elderly luminary with pale, almost white skin approached David. I am Council Elder Mino, he said. You have created quite a stir, human David. It was unintentional, David explained. In our culture. Yes, cultural differences, Mino interrupted. Nevertheless, you have bonded with one of our most promising commanders. This gives you certain privileges in our society. David was confused. Privileges. As Nera's bondmate, you now hold equal rank in our diplomatic hierarchy, Mino explained. Your voice carries the weight of her house. David suddenly realized why the negotiations seemed to be going more smoothly than expected. The luminary were treating him as one of their own high-ranking officials. Later, back in Nera's quarters, David shared this revelation. This could actually help our mission, he said. They're listening to me because of our situation. Nera's skin showed patterns of thoughtful blue and green. Perhaps this complication has advantages. A temporary arrangement, David suggested. We maintain appearances until the treaty is signed. Nera's 3 eyes regarded him carefully. And then, David hadn't thought that far ahead. We'll figure something out. I won't let this harm your position. For the first time since their meeting, Nera's skin showed a soft, warm glow that needed no translation. It was gratitude. Tomorrow you will meet my family house representatives, she said. They have many questions about human bonding traditions. David groaned. This is going to be interesting. Indeed, Nera agreed, her skin flickering with what the translator identified as the luminary equivalent of amusement. Quite interesting. David adjusted to life aboard the luminary ship surprisingly well over the next 3 days. The crew had stopped staring at him, though many still made the heart-touching gesture when he passed. Nera had explained it was a sign of respect for newly bonded pairs. The diplomatic talks were going better than expected. David's accidental marriage to Nara had given him special status that helped move negotiations forward quickly. Captain Lewis had even joked that perhaps they should make accidental marriages part of standard diplomatic protocol. David was in Nara's quarters reviewing trade documents when the first blast hit. The ship lurched violently, throwing him against the wall. Alarms blared as the lights flickered. "What was that?" David asked, picking himself up. Nara's skin had gone pale, almost white with fear. She touched the communication panel. "Command Center, report." A frantic voice answered. "We're under attack. Multiple enemy vessels, unknown configuration." Nara was already moving toward the door, her colors shifting to deep red determination. "The Void Collective," she hissed, her voice filled with dread. David followed her through corridors where crew members ran to battle stations. "Who are they?" "Raiders. Killers. They attack ships in deep space and leave no survivors," Nara explained as they ran. "They've never been bold enough to attack a diplomatic vessel before." The command center was chaos when they arrived. Luminary officers moved with precision despite their obvious fear. The main viewing screen showed at least 7 black ships surrounding the luminary vessel. In the distance, the human ship was also under attack. "Damage report," Nara ordered, taking her command position. "Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. Weapons systems at 60%. Communications with the Earth vessel disrupted," an officer reported. David studied the tactical display. The black ships moved in a strange formation, firing in sequence rather than all at once. "Their targeting systems are advanced," David observed after watching for a few moments. "But they have a pattern." Nara glanced at him, her third eye focused intently on his face. "Explain." David pointed to the display. "They fire in rotation, counterclockwise. There's a 3-second gap between each ship's attack, and they're concentrating on the same sections of our hull." Nara's skin showed surprise. "You determined this from just watching?" "I was a tactical officer before diplomatic service," David explained. "If we time it right, we can predict where they'll hit next and strengthen shields in those areas." Nara didn't hesitate. "Do it," she ordered her crew. "Adjust shield distribution according to Lieutenant Commander Reed's predictions." The crew responded immediately, though David noticed a few skeptical looks. The next attack came exactly where he predicted. The shields held. "Remarkable," said the tactical officer, his skin showing bands of respect. For the next 20 minutes, David worked with the Luminary crew to counter the Void Collective's attack pattern. They managed to destroy one enemy vessel and damage another. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the ship. A console near Nara erupted in sparks and flames, but she didn't move from her position, continuing to issue orders despite the danger. "Commander," an officer's voice came through the communication system. "Deck 7 Section 3 is critical. The manual override is damaged. If we don't seal it, we'll lose that entire section. All crew evacuate Deck 7 immediately," Nara ordered. David looked at the ship schematic. Deck 7 housed environmental controls. If it failed, the ship would lose life support. "The override needs to be activated manually," he asked. "Yes, but the corridor is decompressing. Anyone who goes in risks being trapped," the officer explained. David made his decision instantly. "I'll do it." Nara turned to him, her colors showing alarm. "David, no. Your crew needs you here," he said. "Tell me where to go." For a moment, Nara seemed torn between her duty as commander and her concern for him. Then her colors settled into grim determination. "Take him to Deck 7, she ordered an officer. Minutes later, David stood before a sealed door, wearing a luminary emergency suit that fit poorly over his human frame. "The override is on the far wall," the officer explained. "You'll have about 2 minutes before the section fully decompresses. Once you activate it, the emergency bulkheads will close automatically." "Which means I'll be trapped inside," David finished for him. "Yes." But the suit will give you enough air until we can rescue you. David nodded. Let's do it. The door slid open, and David pushed himself into the damaged section. Immediately, he felt the pull of decompression. The air was thin, and loose objects flew past him toward the breach in the hull. He struggled against the pull, using handholds on the wall to drag himself forward. The override panel was damaged, sparking with electricity. David reached it and began the sequence the officer had taught him. His fingers were clumsy in the thick gloves. Warning lights flashed as the decompression accelerated. Finally, the override activated. Heavy bulkheads slammed shut around the section, sealing off the breach. The immediate danger was over, but David was now trapped. He sat with his back against the wall, conserving the suit's oxygen, and waited. Back in the command center, Nara coordinated the counterattack with new intensity. With David's tactical insights, they had managed to drive off the Void Collective ships. Both the Luminary vessel and the Earth ship had taken damage, but they had survived. 3 hours later, rescue crews cut through the bulkheads to reach David. He had minor injuries from flying debris and was suffering from oxygen deprivation, but he was alive. In the medical bay, Nara stood beside his bed as medics treated his wounds. Her skin rippled with colors that the translator identified as concern, relief, and something deeper, something the translator simply called connection. Why would you risk yourself like that? She asked, her 3 eyes all focused on him. You could have died. David looked up at her, seeing her in a new light. During the battle, he had watched her stand her ground when that console exploded. She had protected her crew with no thought for her own safety. Same reason you stood your ground when that console exploded, he replied. Some things are worth protecting. Nara's skin glowed with a warm golden light that needed no translation. Around them, the luminary medical staff exchanged knowing looks. Something had changed between them. This was no longer just a diplomatic misunderstanding or a convenient arrangement. It had become something real. 2 weeks after the attack, David was finally well enough to leave the medical bay. The luminary doctors had been fascinated by human physiology, and their advanced treatments had healed his injuries quickly. The diplomatic talks had continued without him, with Captain Lewis stepping in. According to reports, the negotiations were going well. Nara came to escort him personally. I thought you might enjoy seeing something other than medical equipment, she said. Would you like to visit our garden chamber? David nodded eagerly. I'd love to see more of your ship. As they walked through the corridors, David noticed a change in how the crew reacted to them. Gone were the curious stares and whispers. Instead, the luminary officers nodded with respect to both of them. They're treating me differently, David observed. Nara's skin showed ripples of blue. You earned their respect during the attack. Many lives were saved because of your actions. The garden chamber took David's breath away. It was a massive dome filled with plants unlike anything on Earth. Flowers that glowed and changed colors. Trees with crystal-like leaves that chimed softly when touched, and pools of water that seemed to flow upward rather than down. This is incredible, David said, reaching out to touch a flower that pulsed with light. These gardens are important to us, Nara explained. They connect us to our homeworld and help maintain our mental balance during long journeys. They walked along a path that wound between the strange plants. Small creatures, something between birds and butterflies, fluttered around them, their wings catching the light. There's something I've wanted to ask you, David said as they stopped beside a pool. About the bond between us. Nara's skin showed gentle waves of curiosity. What would you like to know? You mentioned telepathy before. How does that work between your people? Nara guided him to a bench made from a living plant that shaped itself to comfortably support them as they sat. The bond creates a mental connection, she explained. Bonded pairs can sense each other's emotions, sometimes even thoughts. That is why I have seemed confused by you. I expected to sense your thoughts, but there was only silence. David watched light dance across the strange plants as he considered this. Humans don't have telepathy. We have to communicate the old-fashioned way. Through words and gestures, Nera said, her third eye blinking thoughtfully. Yes, it's less efficient, I suppose. Nera's colors shifted to a shade he hadn't seen before, a soft, warm pink that seemed to glow from within. Perhaps that is not entirely unfortunate. It means we must truly learn about each other. There is value in discovery, in asking questions rather than simply knowing. David felt something shift between them. The awkwardness that had been present since their accidental bonding was fading, replaced by genuine curiosity and respect. I've been reviewing the attack data, David said, changing the subject. The Void Collective ships carried luminary technology. Their weapon systems were identical to yours, just modified slightly. Nera's colors darkened immediately. How did you determine this? The attack pattern matched luminary tactical manuals too closely to be coincidence, and the energy signatures were nearly identical to your weapons. This suggests luminary involvement, Nera said quietly, her skin now showing patterns of deep concern. David nodded. Someone wants our species to fight each other, make us distrust each other during these crucial negotiations. I have shared similar concerns with the High Council, Nera admitted. They dismissed them. The evidence was sent to intelligence for review, but nothing has come of it. Why would they ignore such an obvious connection? Nera's expression darkened, her colors shifting to deep blue and purple. The High Council is divided on the alliance with humans. Some members believe humans are too unpredictable to trust, too emotional, too individualistic. They prefer allies who think as we do. David considered this. The luminary valued order and hierarchy above all else. Humans must seem chaotic in comparison. And what about you? David stopped walking and turned to face her directly. What do you believe, Nera? Her middle eye fixed on him, studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he held her gaze. I believe that unpredictability may be exactly what we need, she said finally. The Void Collective defeats us because they can anticipate our responses. We always follow protocol, even in battle. But you do not. Is that a compliment or a criticism? David asked with a small smile. It is an observation, Nera replied, but her colors shifted to that warm pink again, and perhaps an admission that my people have something to learn from yours. They continued walking through the garden. David stopped occasionally to examine particularly interesting plants, asking questions about their properties and uses. Nera seemed pleased by his curiosity. There is something else I must tell you, Nera said as they approached a small blue tree whose branches formed a canopy over the path. About our bond. David waited, suddenly nervous. The council has reviewed our situation, she continued. They have decided that since the bond was created through cultural misunderstanding, it can be suspended. Suspended, not broken. Breaking a bond is forbidden, Nera explained, but they are willing to consider it dormant, inactive but still technically in place. This would allow me to retain my position without requiring you to fulfill the traditional obligations of a bondmate. David should have felt relieved. This was the solution they had been looking for, yet something made him hesitate. Is that what you want? He asked. Nera's skin rippled with complex colors the translator couldn't identify. It is the logical solution to our problem. That's not what I asked. For a long moment, they stood in silence under the canopy of the blue tree. Our peoples are very different, Nera said finally. Our customs, our biology, our ways of thinking. The bond as my people understand it may not be possible between us. But something else might be, David suggested quietly. Nera's third eye blinked rapidly, showing her surprise. Before she could respond, her communication device chimed. Commander Nera, your presence is required in the council chamber, a voice announced. The human delegation has presented new evidence regarding the attack. We are on our way, Nera replied, her colors shifting back to the professional blue of command. As they walked quickly toward the council chamber, David found himself thinking about bonds, both accidental and intentional. Something was changing between them, something neither luminary tradition nor human diplomacy had prepared them for. The emergency council session revealed disturbing news. Intelligence officers had discovered that a faction within the luminary government had been secretly working with the Void Collective. Their goal was to sabotage the Human Luminary Alliance. The evidence was undeniable, but the council was divided on how to respond. 3 days later, as David and Nera were discussing the situation in her quarters, an urgent message arrived from the luminary homeworld. "The Void Collective has launched a full attack on Lumina," Nera said, her skin pale with shock. "They've breached our outer defenses." Within hours, both the human and luminary ships were racing toward the luminary homeworld. When they arrived, David saw the beautiful planet for the first time, a shimmering blue-green world with 3 small moons. But his admiration was cut short by the sight of over 30 black ships surrounding the planet. "They've blocked all escape routes," Captain Lewis reported from the human vessel. "Civilian ships can't get out." The combined human luminary fleet gathered at a safe distance to assess the situation. David stood beside Nera on the command deck of her ship as she addressed the captains of both fleets through a holographic connection. The luminary homeworld shimmered like a jewel against the darkness of space, now surrounded by the black ships of the Void Collective. Occasional flashes of light showed where battles were taking place in the planet's orbit. "Their shield configuration makes them invulnerable to our conventional attacks," Nera said, her voice steady despite her obvious concern. "Our standard tactics have failed. They've adapted to our attack patterns." "Not invulnerable," David corrected gently. "Just well defended. We need to try something they won't expect." Nera looked at him with all 3 eyes. "What do you suggest?" David outlined his plan quickly. Instead of the coordinated, simultaneous attack that luminary doctrine demanded, he proposed something radically different. Small, fast ships would attack from random vectors at unpredictable intervals. Each captain would make independent decisions based on the changing situation, rather than following a central command. This approach worked in the Battle of Titan, when Earth forces were outnumbered, David explained. It creates confusion and forces the enemy to defend in all directions at once. His plan violated every luminary battle doctrine. It required improvisation, individual decision-making, concepts foreign to their rigid hierarchy. "It will never be approved," a luminary captain objected immediately. "Our forces are trained to follow precise protocols. What you suggest is chaos." "Controlled chaos," David corrected. "The kind humans excel at." The council representatives who had joined the call looked horrified at the suggestion. "Our fleet has never operated without central coordination," one elder said. "It goes against all our traditions." Nera stood silently for a moment, her skin shifting through complex patterns as she considered the options. Every luminary in the room watched her, waiting for her decision. "Then I will take responsibility," Nera declared finally, her colors blazing with determination. "As fleet commander, I authorize this tactical deviation." The council representatives protested, but Nera cut them off. "Every moment we debate, more lives are lost. Captain Lewis, is your fleet willing to lead this unorthodox attack?" Lewis nodded. "We are." "Then it is decided," Nera said. "All ships prepare to implement Commander Reed's plan." What followed was unlike any battle in luminary history. The human ships moved in seemingly random patterns, attacking and retreating without apparent coordination. Reluctantly at first, then with increasing confidence, the luminary captains began to follow their example. David worked alongside Nera on the command deck, helping her coordinate the chaotic yet effective assault. The Void Collective ships, programmed to counter traditional luminary tactics, couldn't adapt to the unpredictable attack patterns. "It's working," an officer reported as the first enemy ship exploded. "Their formation is breaking." Over the next 6 hours, the combined fleet slowly pushed back the Void Collective. 3 more enemy ships were destroyed, and several others retreated from the battle. The luminary homeworld's defense system was back online, adding its firepower to the attack. David worked until exhaustion threatened to overcome him. At one point, he felt Nara's hand on his shoulder, a gesture she must have learned from watching humans. "Rest," she said. "You've done enough." David shook his head. "Not until it's over." Finally, the remaining Void Collective ships began to retreat. The command deck erupted in cheers as the enemy disappeared into the darkness of space. "We did it," David said, his voice hoarse from issuing orders for hours. Nara's skin glowed with what he now recognized as triumph and relief. "No, David, you did it. Your plan saved my world." Hours later, after debriefings and reports, David found himself alone on the observation deck, watching the luminary homeworld turn slowly below. The planet's 3 moons cast silver light across its oceans. It was breathtakingly beautiful. He heard the door slide open behind him, but didn't turn. He knew who it was from the soft glow that reflected on the viewport glass. "The Council has requested my presence," Nara said, coming to stand beside him. "They wish to discuss today's unconventional tactics." "Are you in trouble?" David asked. "Quite the opposite. They wish to award me their highest honor for saving the homeworld." Her colors showed embarrassment. "I told them the honor belongs to you." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the planet below. "You understand that our bond can be dissolved now," she said quietly after a while. "I have enough standing after our victory to weather the dishonor. The Council has agreed to make an exception in our case, given the circumstances." David turned to look at her. Over the weeks they had spent together, he had learned to read her colors almost as well as her words. He could see uncertainty there now, and something else, hope. "And if I don't want it dissolved?" David asked carefully. Nara's colors shifted to a pattern he'd come to recognize, surprise, followed by that warm, golden glow that meant happiness. "Then we would be creating something entirely new," she said, extending her hand toward him. "Not quite a luminary bond, not quite a human relationship, something unpredictable." David took her hand. Her skin was warm against his, pulsing gently with light that seemed to beat in time with her heart. "I like unpredictable," he said. "It's worked well for us so far." Nara's third eye blinked rapidly, a sign of emotion he now found endearing rather than alien. "The Council has asked me to remain as liaison to Earth. I would be stationed on your planet for at least a year." "I think Earth would agree to those terms," David said with a smile. "And so would I." As they stood together looking out at the stars, David thought about how a simple cultural misunderstanding had led to something neither of them could have predicted. In trying to build an alliance between worlds, they had found something more important: understanding between 2 very different beings. Nara's hand tightened around his, and for a moment, David could have sworn he felt something, not quite a thought, not quite an emotion, but a presence in his mind that wasn't his own. "Did you feel that?" Nara asked, her colors brightening with excitement. "I'm not sure," David admitted. "It was strange." "Perhaps humans have more abilities than you realize," Nara suggested, "with time and practice." David smiled. "Like you said, we have a lot to learn about each other." Below them, the luminary homeworld continued its peaceful rotation, now safe from harm. Above them, the vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, full of dangers but also possibilities. And between them, something new was growing, a bond that transcended both their worlds.